Welcome in to Basketball by Association. That's my voice for the whole podcast. My name is Arky. Shea. I changed it for you. I knew it would be too much for you. It'd be too much for me. Joel C. Cortez on the other side, sporting the freshly minted Indiana Pacers 1,000 points a game scoring streak that they're going on. How are you, Joel? Ready to talk some basketball?
I'm ready to talk some basketball, but first was that like an Eric Cartman meets whatever the logo, the old Miner logo from the Denver Nuggets would have sounded like? Because that's where I think that was going.
I think it's more the old Denver Nuggets logo, the old Miners.
There's no way that guy didn't sound like that. Let's be real.
Don't get too far down in that ditch there. So, I guess you see some Eric Cartman there. I wasn't really expecting that in there. But anyway, we're ready to talk some hoopage. Are you ready to talk some hoopage? We're almost ready to crown a champion.
A asterisk sort of champion, a half champion.
Don't you asterisk another championship the Lakers might win.
All right. Well, before we do this, we have to name an episode. The episode. This is episode 160, and there's only two players in NBA history who have logged 160 career playoff games. One of them is James Harden. We are absolutely not naming an episode after James Harden right now or any time in the foreseeable future.
That sounds personal.
James, you need to like live up to some things here first. But this next guy, more than deserving. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a 13-time All-Star. An 11-time rebounding champ, a 2-time NBA champ, no asterisks involved. He was the All-Star Game MVP in 1959/60. He was the Rookie of the Year that year. So think about it, Rookie of the Year and the All-Star Game MVP in the same year. Finals MVP in 71-72. 7-time scoring champ. 10-time All-NBA. 4-time MVP. 2-time All-Defense. But there's only one number, and if I mention this number, you'll know exactly who it is.
Oh, I don't know. You're going to have to help me with this one.
All right, the number 100.
Oh, Reggie Miller.
Yeah. I hate you.
No, those are some great accolades for Wilt. Wow, that is have we not named an episode after Wilt Chamberlain?
I don't think we've done a Wilt Chamberlain episode, and if we have, it was so long ago that I'm willing to do this without an asterisk, just to not have to name it after James Harden. But again, the stats around Wilt are well known at this point. But yes, he averaged 50 points a game in a season. He averaged 20 or more rebounds. What is this? It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 11 times. And all the lowest rebounding season he ever had was 18.4.
Woo, he got hurt.
100 points in a game. Led the league in assists one year on a dare just because he said he was going to. Like it's just ridiculous. But let me two-time champion, and that's it, I guess.
That's all. A very quiet career he led in the hoopage. I want to move on. I don't want to harp on this part because this is a conversation, I think, a bigger one for a longer time. I feel like when we talk about the greatest player of all time, we don't want to look before 1985 for some reason. Like there's 3 dudes that we'll consider, and that's it. And you got to find the right smart dude that'll even want to throw Kobe into the equation at that point. So like no one allows for any basketball to have played before, the 3-point shot was introduced. Like everyone just says, whatever.
The league is smaller. The overall talent pool is not quite the same.
I understand,
all those arguments.
You can't punish a guy for being the greatest freak, whatever. He could have done something else and been the greatest baker. I don't know, but he decided to use his heights for good and to throw balls in peach baskets. Okay, that's what he decided to do. So anyway, I think that's a conversation, a much bigger one for later.
For sure.
Let's see if we can do Wilt a little justice here by talking about one of his great teams that he did not play for, the New Orleans Pelicans, who were terrible. Okay, so this is the season tournament. I want to get your broader thoughts on it in just a moment. But just to know, Joel, that on a night when the NBA says for the second straight or third time this week, no other basketball except for this.
Yep.
We got ourselves one pretty decent game and one stinker. Okay. The cool thing, I'll get to the Pelicans in just a moment. Did you see the stat on the Milwaukee, Indiana game since you're wearing that shirt?
Oh, man, you're all over the place here. I'm all prepped for New Orleans and LA, and now we're going to Milwaukee and Indiana.
We're going to get to New Orleans, LA. I promise you. There's really 4 teams to talk about for the most part. And I'll save my thoughts on something very important about the Knicks in just a moment. But hey, listen, it's going to happen. That betting total was the highest in 30 years for the total number of points to be scored in that game. I think it was 257.5 the last time I saw it. It could have gone up or down. I'm not quite sure. But the time when I was reading the article, it was 257.5. Now, they scored 10 points under that. But still, a lot of points were expected in the Milwaukee-Indiana game. And now the Indiana Pacers are one step closer to being the champions that Reggie Miller always thought they could be, but just couldn't quite get over the hump. How about that? And they're going to be crowned before Christmas.
Look, we, and by we, I mean me, but we on this show called out the Pacers in preseason. I owned this shirt prior to this run. I was on this bandwagon.
It looks newer.
Beforehand.
It looks new.
It looks new, but it's already been sewed once in the shoulder. So I got proof that it was from before. But
right. You just got very good fabric softener then.
Indiana is so much fun. They need to be on national TV more. I'm glad that not only Tyrese Haliburton called that out, Miles Turner called that out, other people around the broadcast last night called that out. But even before this game, this was true. It's neat that they've gotten this far, that people are seeing them, because you can call this Tyrese Haliburton's coming out party, but he's been doing this now for a season plus in Indiana, where it just keeps getting better and better. And unless you're a fantasy owner, you don't see it.
Well, fantasy wise, I'm on a bye this week, so it doesn't really affect me one way or the other. By the way, I think did I just beat you, Mr. Joel C. Corda? No, I didn't beat you. We are tied in the division, I think, we're right now, as far as our record's concerned. I want to say, as far as the Tyrese Haliburton coming out party, I think us really cool, hip basketball fans know a lot about Tyrese Haliburton. I think when you have the sort of standalone moment that he was able to have at the very end of that Boston game a couple of nights ago, I think that's when sort of people got to give him more of his flowers, and more people. There wasn't focus taken away from him. There was nothing really else happening on a Tuesday night. Literally nothing else happening on the Tuesday night. That when Boston came back in that game and tied it up in the last minute and a half or so, and then Tyrese Haliburton basically says, our bad. You guys were in this game a little too long. Let's do this 4-point play. Let's look good. By the way, I can't breathe. Okay. I'm wheezing. I'm taking inhalers. Okay. I got this upper respiratory infection, but you know what? It's my time. And he does really what is something that I think you and I think he's very capable of, but to do it against, he didn't do it against like the Hawks. He did it against the team that most people think is going to be the preeminent team coming out of the East. And to do it on that stage where it was standalone for him, I think that was a breakout moment for him, despite the fact that we know how good he can be. And who knows, maybe we don't know how good he can be. Maybe he can still be, eons and eons beyond what we think. But I do think that was a nice coming out moment, at least for him coming into this game against Milwaukee. And Milwaukee was no slouch. Clearly, both these two teams last night wanted to play, wanted to win this thing. And
Giannis was pissed when they didn't win, which is great. You want to see that. You want to see your biggest stars taking this seriously. And like you said, they did. And the losers took it seriously, too, by being upset.
As much as you see sort of going into this, a lot of players being like, I don't really know what's going on. I'm just showing up to play. And this is my date to show up here. I'll be right here. You just throw it out to me. You did see that there was frustration there because this was, it was money time. But it's also a chance for more. I tend to think that if you put this thing in February or any other time, and there's a trophy at the end, I think a certain amount of pride takes over. A certain amount of competitiveness takes over.
By the time the tournament itself begins, yes.
Right.
Pool play was hit or miss.
The pool play was interesting because you have like the Celtics playing the Bulls and having to win by like 25, and then keeping who was it that they were hacking? DeAndre Jordan, right? They were like hacking him like at the end of in the fourth quarter to try to increase that point margin to get to this point. Like it was.
If it was against the Bulls, it was probably Drummond, but
no, Andre Drummond, right? Not DeAndre Drummond.
Yeah.
Andre Drummond. They were hacking him at the end of that game just to try to get to the free throw line. By the way, I think he missed all 6 of his free throws when they did that. And Billy Donovan's ticked off, which he shouldn't be. He's got a terrible team, whatever. Like it's one of those things where like that the pool play is a little murky-ish, but by the time it's like knockout rounds, it's when you keep going on, when you keep making another big check. Then yeah. Plus, also you're playing for your teammates who not everybody gets to have the Giannis contract. Not everybody has the Tyrese Haliburton contract. There are guys in there that, an extra 50 grand means something. And I'm also not so jaded.
500 grand if you win it,
Yeah, it's true. And you keep winning as you go forward. It's not just win this game and you're done. The next round, you get more. I'm not so jaded to think that people who are making $30 million a year don't want an extra 100 grand. Like people who have money.
LeBron had the quote last night where they said, "Aren't you old to be taking that charge from Zion?" In a game like this where it's not a championship game, and LeBron said, "I'm not too old to take it for $500,000." And how many millions and millions of dollars does LeBron have? So that's
we think, hey, if I had $50 million a year for the last 10 years, what would I? But people who have money, what do they want? More money. Right. Like there is no, this is enough money for me. So like, I think that's an interesting point too. And I do think the play-in tournament did show a ton of competitiveness for this. And I thought, I didn't know how much we get it in I thought we would get it in the knockout round because the money is definitely on the line. It's harder to see it when you're playing in a pool. But yeah, I totally agree with this concept so far. I'd like to clean up some things going forward, but regardless, I don't want to get too far onto that before I say that it was a great win for Indiana last night. They get to move on, and I don't think everyone had Indiana as one of their potential finalists going into this thing. So the NBA gets a little bit of, a really good name on the other end we're about to talk about, and they get another team that's going to be super fun to watch and people will like because it's a very pleasing level of basketball for casual viewers.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I think Indiana was one of the very first teams when pool play was just beginning who took this seriously from the start. There were guys out there who were like, I don't know what's going on, like you said. But Indiana, right from the beginning, was like, no, this is a cool idea. We're all in. This is a good test for us. We're going to see where we're at. Indiana was a team that really didn't have an identity last year. I think they had many of the same personnel as this year, but they were figuring out who was going to fit what roles, and they didn't know what they were going to look like every single night. And credit them, credit Rick Carlisle, credit all the players for the buy-in and for the execution on this to go, our identity is to be this blazingly fast team built around Tyrese Haliburton. But what I love about these Pacers, what has been great in pool play, what's been great in single elimination has been it's a star-driven system, yes. Like, you need Tyrese Haliburton to make this go. But it's and Miles Turner is a star in his own right as well. But it also is such a team-centric concept of what they're playing. The ball is moving the same way it did with the Warriors, with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson at their height. Same way with the 7-second or less Suns, and some of these other great teams that have put up a ton of points. Everybody gets to eat. I know they're not good defensively. They're the number one ranked team offensively. That's been said 100 times. But just unpack for a minute that they're averaging 128 points per game, which is like the highest in 20 plus years or whatever. And the closest team behind them is 6 points per game less on that list. The second and third place are at like 122 or 120. It's ridiculous. And yes, Indiana is the second worst team defensively. And you saw that with Milwaukee, where it's like, my goodness, Giannis just keeps getting a lot of dunks here. And it's like, I've watched Indiana a fair amount of times this season because I really like them. They get dunked on a lot. People walk down Main Street a lot. But then they're just going to go, they're going to outlet and go and dare you to stop them on the other end. And Rick Carlisle said, we are figuring out the defense as we go. There's been little flashes. They do have some good defenders. Miles Turner, great shot blocker. Bruce Brown, very good defender. Aaron Nesmith is coming along. Andrew Nembhard coming along as defenders too. You want Tyrese Haliburton to continue to improve in that regard, but it's just part of the identity. They're going to score that ton of points. They can shoot They're playing with no fear right now. And I think what's great about the tournament, it still feels a little early in the year for me. Feels like we should have started it maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks later than they did. But what's great is this is a measuring stick. It's a growing opportunity for a team like the Pacers that if they hold on to the second or third seed, or even, drop down into the fourth, which I think is probably realistic where they'll wind up, they're going to be one of those proverbial teams that's like, oh, they just got into the playoffs. That's really nice. But, they haven't really been here and they've got to cut their teeth and gain that experience. Well, you know what? This is some experience. This can be banked towards later because these are playoff level games. And yeah, it's a little different. It's not a series where you're able to make adjustments and really lock in. There's going to be big question marks when this team gets to the postseason about can a high-scoring team that's so bad at defense, can they win in a playoff series when things slow down, blah, 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 all those old arguments. But you get to answer some of that. You get to put some of that on tape. You get to log some of this where maybe going into your first playoff series in April doesn't feel so big and intimidating to many of these players having done this, especially if you go, man, we got the NBA Cup. Like, I know it's not the championship, or we played in the NBA Cup championship game. We got a taste of it. And I think that's one of the unsung things about this little mini tournament is what it can do for some of these up and coming teams. And just lowering that learning curve a bit, whereas before it's always been a given. It's like, yeah, you get into the playoffs that first time, see how you do, but chances are as soon as you run into a veteran team, they're going to show you how it's done.
I think that's an interesting point to bring up about that metal that may be tested here, that may be able to be bankable experience, and you'd have that experience in season, and you'd have it use it that season. I think that's worthy of watching later on. The other end of the bracket finds the Lakers beating the Pelicans, just squeaking out a big one, 133-89. It is the third largest loss in New Orleans Pelicans history. 44 is not close. It was a close first quarter.
Right.
The second quarter, the Lakers sort of
pulled. It was manageable at halftime.
I think it was 13 points at halftime. And the third quarter, the wheels fell off for the Pelicans. The Lakers put up 43 points in that third quarter, and they routed the Pelicans, as I mentioned, by 44. LeBron, a quiet 30-point effort. Anthony Davis.
In 25 minutes. LeBron had never done that before. That was a new stat for him. 30 points in 25 minutes or less. Crazy.
Anthony Davis went 16 and 15. Check this out. The plus-minus for the starting five for your Los Angeles Lakers. You ready? LeBron plus 36, Anthony Davis plus 35, Cam Reddish plus 31.
That's got to be the highest plus minus in Cam Reddish's career, bar none.
I don't even have to look it up. I know that is. Torian Prince plus 23 and D'Angelo Russell also plus 23.
And if you go to New Orleans starters, it's the mirror image of that, just with a big old minus sign
I'll do it. Zion minus 33, Ingram minus 33, McCollum minus 38, Valanciunas minus 25, Herb Jones minus 22. Wow, that was a lot. Zion said after the game that he wished he was gooder. In fact, I think it was more of an effort thing that he brought up. They were quote too late back in that game, or he was too late back specifically in that game. You want to talk about testing the championship medal? Zion clearly, if he thinks this is a championship type of atmosphere, too late back is probably not what I like to hear about myself.
Right. And there too, that's again a measuring stick type of thing. New Orleans walks into a big game and they learn a lesson here by 44 points. That's different than if you get blown out by 44 points in a regular season game, because you shake it off and you go, yeah, we're on to the next one. We got the next night up and we're going to keep building towards that postseason. That is one of the things I like about this is, yeah, they're going to be on to their next regular season game. It continues. But the coaching staff and the players, those who are going to hold themselves mentally accountable, are going to be able to go back to this and say, and even as the playoff run begins down that home stretch where the games really start to tighten up and matter because you're jockeying for seeding, or once you get into the play-in tournament, which is probably where New Orleans is going to wind up, and it's getting into single elimination, like hey guys, remember that? We cannot do that. And now we know what that feels like. We know what that looks like. It's disappointing for New Orleans because they've been in the play-in before. They've been in some playoff series. It hasn't been with Zion. So you can give a little bit of leeway for that. Zion led the entire game, or led the starters with 13 points. The leading scorer for the Pelicans the leading scorer for the Pelicans was Trey Murphy with 14 points. No other New Orleans starter had double figures. So this is, yes, it's on Zion. You're one of the leaders. You can't be coming out and going, oh, I feel like I was too lazy in that game. That's kind of been a common theme with Zion since he's been in the NBA, which is
tough. I read an article calling this the most impactful and important game of his career. Do you think that was right? Of his career, obviously. I mean, because he's had a ton of injuries.
NBA career, sure. I guess.
I mean, because it was the semifinals, I guess, of a tournament where they could have won more money and a trophy if they won one more game after this.
Yeah,
I don't see a lot of February games for him being that impactful, especially since he's been so hurt.
That's it. That's why it's impactful, I think, is because he's just missed so much of the rest of it. There would have been other big regular season games or play-in tournament games where he was not present. He wasn't suited up. So those otherwise should have ranked this way. But I guess I would agree with that. But as much as Zion deserves to take some blame, and I agree with his statement, and it is a red flag that effort continues to come up for this particular player, I do want to point out, like, this is a total 100% team loss. Everybody on that roster didn't do what they were supposed to. And if Zion isn't bringing you along energy-wise, where is Brandon Ingram as a leader? Where is CJ McCollum? Willie Green obviously didn't make the right adjustments at halftime. So there's all sorts of blame to go around for a game like this. If they continue to showcase this type of DNA in bigger games, I'd be really concerned. But for right now, it's kind of like, all right, you took a beating to a Lakers team that their goal is a championship. They're primed to do it. They have not played their best throughout the early portion of the season because they've been hurt, because there's a lot of different moving parts, because the Lakers kind of ease into things. But this, to me, shows you just how dangerous the Lakers are when, hey, they're not even at full strength, mentally, physically, whatever, and they're in the championship of the NBA Cup. Remember, I picked the Lakers, as much as it pains me, to win the championship this year. And this type of moment here is the difference.
So this is what you were talking about, right? You were talking about the NCAA tournament, right?
No, but this type of moment does, I think, prove my point, or at least speaks to it. Like, it's a veteran team with a ton of options that walks in and is not overwhelmed by the moment. And yeah, that team has LeBron James on its side. That's great, and Anthony Davis and so forth. But they're built to win bigger things than this. But the fact they can come in on this just shows you they're ready across the season, and they are the team in the West to be feared, I think.
Well, on that thought, Willie Green, the coach of the Pelicans, said, well, he basically pointed out that the experience factor and the veterans on that team made all the difference in the world in that game. It said basically that his team basically played too like they were as young as they are.
Yeah, I mean, they are, but at the same time, like, LA's got a lot of veterans up and down the roster, but they got a lot of young guys too, like Christian Wood and Cam Reddish. I guess Austin Reeves has played some meaningful games, but Reddish and Wood and some of those other guys have not played a ton of meaningful games in their career. CJ McCollum and Jonas Valanciunas have. They're not chopped liver. They're supposed to be some of your veteran leaders. So I buy that to an extent, but it's not as if New Orleans has no veterans on the team who have been there before. It's not as if Brandon Ingram hasn't gone through some of the play-in games and some of these other guys. We just saw New Orleans make a big run 2 years ago. Trey Murphy was on that team. Herb Jones was on that team. They were in the mix last year too. So I buy it, but I don't buy it.
I think he's got a fair point. Like I could see, like, if you're sort of talking head of this, but like you lost by 44. Like I get it, right. If like you lost by 6 and you missed a couple of moments, like you just didn't know where you were on the floor, how much time went. Like I kind of get that. Maybe the moment got to you, but not to this degree. Not to the where that was an all systems failure third quarter, especially. It was. You don't play a lot worse than that. I mean, granted, we did get to see, it's the most outstanding memory. We don't have to necessarily talk about what Dallas did the night before, where Luka was talking about how how he was basically just whipping everybody's butt on the other end. He's like, "That's why you're complaining." Why is he mad? I'm just beating his ass, right? Well, sorry, that's the A word, but like we could sort of mention that was a tough loss and a big time win, but this one was obviously the more impactful one, and so. We don't have a ton of time left here, but I do want to talk about a couple things here on the podcast before we go with the NBA outside of the in-season tournament. First of all, I'd just like to say to wrap up the in-season tournament for this podcast, I'm not mad that the Knicks did make the championship. The biggest thing I was worried about is that the Knicks would be the team that stopped the losing streak of the Pistons the night before. I'm good. I'm good. It wasn't the Knicks. By the way, the Pistons have won like 4 games since February. Like it's awful.
Let me refresh here because my computer can't even keep up with their losing streak.
What have they lost 18 in a row?
Yeah, they've lost 18 in a row. They're 2-19. So remember, they started the season 2-1.
Yeah, just like they were hot.
San Antonio started the season 3-2, and the Spurs have lost 15 in a row now. I got a chance to watch the Pistons against the Lakers last week, actually.
On purpose?
So got a chance to see LeBron. Well, we were going to see LeBron because you just don't know how many chances you'll get. Yeah. And I'm going with some buddies of mine who are Lakers fans and from LA originally. But yeah, the Pistons somehow, despite having a better talent level than last year, because most of their young guys were healthy, no cohesiveness. It is a mess. It is as bad as the record looks. And a Monty Williams team, like you look at that and go, what is he coaching them to do? But I just think the learning curve is so high that the guys have not wrapped their minds around it. But they're lacking shooters. They've conspicuously been sitting all of their veterans. I mean,
conspicuously, what are you talking about conspicuously?
Bojan Bogdanovic just played his first game 2 nights ago of the season. Joe Harris has yet to play. Monte Morris hasn't played yet. Those are all guys who are adults in the room who would help this team be more competitive. And they've all been conspicuously sitting. So, but it's bad. It's really ugly in Detroit.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to spend as much time on the Pistons. I just thought, wow, that's really, really bad. Really, really, really bad. Just glad that
the Spurs at least have been losing some close games where they were in it, and you see that youth come out and they piss it away. But
I want to give you, look at us throwing out all the dirty words. I throw the A word out, you throw the P word out. Let's do whatever.
Well, we talked about the Pistons. So
sorry. They pistoned it away. I get it. I see what you're saying. I want to give you a chance to sort of talk about your Timberwolves because they have not cooled down since we have last chatted. Their teams have come back to earth a little bit, like Dallas has come back to earth just a little bit, despite beating Utah by 50 the other night. Will Brady called it like, he's going to throw another cuss word out, but I don't want to throw that one out. But it was bad. He called it, it was bad. It's like the worst he's ever seen. But the T-Wolves so far have not come back to earth. I'm impressed with how they've looked through the first 20 games. We're a quarter way through the season. They look good, Joel. Good. Like contender good.
And they missed 3 games from Anthony Edwards with the hip injury. They won despite his absence. They've been missing Jaden McDaniels for almost 3 weeks now due to a hip injury as well. He should be coming back. It's been a great opportunity for a couple of their young guys. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been playing starters minutes and is finally knocking down shots, but looking like not the lead defender because that's supposed to be Jaden McDaniels, but their secondary defender for sure. Anthony Edwards more than fills in as a lead or a secondary defender, and a lot of times he's been taking it upon himself to guard the opposing team's best player in crunch time. But even a guy like Troy Brown, who I've never been a huge fan of prior to this, suddenly gets minutes with McDaniels and Edwards going down and looks like he may be reliable as a hustle guy and knocking down some shots, a 3-and-D guy, the way he was envisioned when he was drafted by the Wizards. So they're a team built on defense. The offense can be a lot better. They keep talking about that they feel good about where the defense is, and they see that as a constant.
Joel,
and
they
yet
got
the
the
offense
third
can be even better.
Margin right now per game,
right?
Like in the NBA.
That's what's scary is nobody on that team is satisfied yet with the way the offense is clicking and moving. But they're all saying the right things and they're trying to hit that. So they do have another level yet to reach. I think they have staying power to be in the top 6. I'm not going to go out on any
top
limbs
6?
yet.
You think that they're only a top 6 team? I guess number 1 would be number 6. But do you?
Right.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to chomp down on you. Be like you don't believe in your team that much, but you think they're coming back earth a little bit at some point, like barely in the guaranteed portion.
I guess I've just learned from watching the NBA for a long time that to race out to a great start in the first quarter of the season is helpful. There's no shade upon it, but especially for a team that's not been there in that position before as a front runner, to hang too much on that is really risky. Talk to me when we get the All-Star break if they're still in first place.
But they're 11-2 in the West. Like they're beating the teams that they're going to have to be judged against so far early on, and they played a bunch of them so far.
Yeah, and when you watch their games against good teams or bad, the thing that's really standing out about this Minnesota team is the maturity and the execution of understanding the who, what, when, and where, and not just, coming out and hoping to be more talented or, canning a bunch of threes. They're executing in a lot of different ways. They have shown that they will defend for 48 minutes and still be able to find another level defensively down the last 6 minutes of a game. Those are all very promising things. Rudy Gobert is playing Defensive Player of the Year impact right now. Like, he is the front runner far and away. And he wasn't even close last year. Karl Anthony Towns has slotted in as the secondary scorer. He's playing under control a lot more, both offensively and defensively, playing with better base, playing with a better ability to be able to decelerate on offense. He still gets picked up, offensive fouls and charges here or there, which has been a bugaboo, but they've been really minimized. They've been reduced. And Anthony Edwards he is the real deal. The supporting cast, I think, is the real deal. You're still concerned about who's the third scorer on this team. That's something that the Wolves broadcasters have been bringing up a lot. It's supposed to be Jaden McDaniels. He's got to get healthy first. There's other guys that on any given night could be the third scorer, but you want to know who that is by the time you get to the playoffs. So there's questions left to be answered. There's some really good teams in the West. The Lakers, the Nuggets especially. The Thunder are going to hang around. The Suns, I think, will make a run. They're too talented not to. Heck, the Clippers may make a run at some point here. So talk to me when we get to the All-Star break if Minnesota's still sitting in first. But I do think they have shown they are one of the upper echelon teams this year in the West and league-wide. And that is a huge step forward from where they've been. Where they wind up in the standings, there's a lot of season left to play, man.
All right, I get it. You're a homer. You've been hurt before by this team. I can get that.
But we've all seen teams. We've all seen teams that race out to that big start and they're like, "Wow, what is Orlando doing in first place?" Well, they won't be there soon.
Orlando wasn't beating the Thunder, who, by the way, they're 3 games up on now. Excuse me, and the Thunder are good this year. The 76ers, the Knicks, the Pelicans, who were just a game away from playing for the in-season championship. The Warriors already a couple of times this year. They've beaten the Pelicans a couple of times, beaten the Celtics, beaten Denver, beaten Miami. They've beaten good teams, West and East. And that's the part that I think gives me the hope that they have more staying power than maybe that you're believing right now, is that Dallas, for example. Remember we were talking about Dallas a couple of weeks ago, and they had beat up a bunch of tomato cans to start off the season, but they were still winning the games. Well, the schedule got a little bit tougher. They lost a few more games. They've come back to earth more recently, and I think they're 4-6 in the last 10 or something like that. So they've cooled just a touch, but they also play tougher teams. The team that played tougher teams is number 1. Well, they're the team that's beating those number 1 teams right now, too. So, they're doing it against teams and not broken teams. This isn't Denver without Jokic and stuff. They're winning important games with teams that are as fully functional as you can sort of expect in November and December. And,
and they're taking care of business against the bad teams. One of the things about the Wolves over the last 2 years is they've gotten up for the big games. They've been very competitive in those big games. But they lost to Detroit, I think, twice last year. For example, they've lost to a bunch of bottom feeder teams along the way where they had no business giving up those games and they just didn't have the focus. You are not seeing them do that this year.
Spurs, Hornets, Jazz, their last 3 wins. Now they're taking on the Grizzlies tonight. So, yeah, you're right. They're taking care of everybody right now, which is, again, why I have more faith. I don't know how I have more faith in the Timberwolves than the guy on this podcast who is a lifelong Timberwolves fan. But that is where we are in 2023. We have someone who has been brutally beaten down since Kevin Garnett
Right.
left, and I completely understand.
I mean, it's the same things, like tongue in cheek. You tell me, on the air, like, oh, Knicks are going 82-0, and will give me those texts. But when we really get down to it in some of those games, you're like, with the Knicks, it's like, I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I can predict more than that yet.
Can I ask you? Do you have anything else you want to hit before we get out? Because I have one last thing I want to ask you about real quick.
Yeah.
The Knicks obviously lost in the quarterfinals, the knock-in game last week. Afterwards, I think it was Kenny Smith who said the Knicks. This is why the Knicks will always be in the middle of the pack, because the Knicks will never, whenever they go on the floor, have the best player on the floor. Whenever the Knicks go on the court, they will always have at best the number 2 guy on the floor. Do you think that is something that is real with New York, and it's something that can sort of preclude them from being, or do you think this is Kenny Smith just sort of chit-chatting away?
I think especially in the East, when you look at who they're going to run into, I would buy into that. And it's no shade to Julius Randle or Jalen Brunson, depending on which one you want to nominate as their best player. It's probably been Brunson so far this year because Randle's so far, yeah.
But Julius Randle should have won an MVP 2 years ago. So
right, but is Jalen Brunson better than Jason Tatum? No. Is he better than Jaylen Brown? He's probably around the same level, I would think. Is he better than Giannis? No. Is he better than Embiid? No. Is he better than Jimmy Butler? Jimmy's got again that magical quality.
I think it depends on when they play. It depends on when they play.
And I mean, here's where it gets tough. Is he better than Tyrese Haliburton? No, he's not. And if they run into Orlando, is Jalen Brunson better than Paolo Banchero? At this point, I'd probably say yeah. I would say yeah, but
it's not.
For how
it's
much
not
longer?
far away though.
Right, for how much longer? So those are all the teams, and we didn't even talk about Cleveland, who I think will put together a run. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They started out slow with injuries. Is Brunson better than Donovan Mitchell? Mitchell's been up and down. Is he better than Darius Garland? No, he's probably on the same level.
You know what you're talking about now.
Cleveland's got 2 of those guys.
But what you're talking about now is you're putting them at best in the middle of the pack, like Kenny Smith was saying. So,
right. And you could play that same game out west too. It is a star-driven league. But you look at some of those other teams, and I do think New York's supporting cast, if they figure it out, but on paper, New York's supporting cast is better than some of those other top-line star-driven teams, and that's what's going to give them that puncher's chance. But as Kenny was saying, like in a 7-game series, especially you get into the semifinals, the conference finals, the NBA finals, at some point, it's hard to beat the team that's got the best player on the floor.
So far, there's only if I'm as a Knicks fan, there's only 2 teams I'm afraid of in the East right now. 2 teams that I think they're scary, and I don't know how the Knicks are going to be able to match up.
Chicago and Washington, I hear
you. Yeah, I can't figure out the Wizards. They're just so darn talented, and they're just so clean at this point. No, the 2 teams that Philadelphia, I worry a lot about, even though I don't know how the Knicks match up for 7 games or hell, even 5 games with Philadelphia consistently. In Milwaukee, those are the 2 teams that I really. I think the Knicks can beat Boston. I think the Knicks can beat Cleveland. I think the Knicks. I mean, maybe the 3rd team on that list would probably be Indiana.
Yeah, and I think they could ugly it up so far that all of a sudden the Pacers can't even get to what they want to do,
Yeah, but I don't know how many games in a series you can do that with, So, but right now I'm with you. I think maybe you don't have the number 1 guy every single night, but doesn't mean your number 1 doesn't play better than their number 1 both nights, and the supporting cast doesn't come in and help you. Philadelphia, though, Philadelphia scares me. Philadelphia is they're a beast ready to sort of explode, and I don't think they're that worried right now about the regular season. And I mean, they're fine. They're fine. What are they? 14-7, 13-7, 13-7 right now. They're fine, but I don't think that they're so worried about being in the top of the East at this point.
I'll say this about the Knicks. They've got 3 clear-cut number 2 stars, and that's what Kenny was getting at. The math changes if RJ Barrett is able to stay up in that level to also be a number 2 star. If you got 3 of those guys, you can do something even if you don't have the best player on the floor. So again, we've been saying this for a couple of years. So much hinges on RJ Barrett's ascendance, and we've seen flashes of it. We've seen progression. He continues to get there, but can he stay there for an entire season and through the playoffs and be a guy that is reliable, not just a bonus when he scores consistently? Because I still feel like with Barrett, you go, oh, Brunson will get his. Randall's shot the ball like crap this year, but we know he's got to progress to the means at some point. And man, it'll be great if we can get 25 from Barrett tonight. That'll be amazing. We'll win that game. You shouldn't be saying that. You should be saying, we know we'll get 20 points from Barrett tonight, and it's going to happen. And we just need to make sure that Josh Hart hits some shots or Dante DiVincenzo hits some shots, that sort of thing. That's where the Knicks, to me, still feels shaky, as the offense can bog down and suddenly no one can hit shots. It is so contagious with that team. And Brunson and Randall can, in very ugly fashion, get some points, but they have to work so hard on those nights. Where is RJ Barrett's ability to transcend the fact that nobody else is knocking down shots? I feel like he kind of just goes as they go.
Fair enough. All right, one last quick question.
Yeah.
Detroit Pistons have lost 18 in a row, as we talked about earlier. 26 is the record for in a single season. Do they get that? Here's their upcoming schedule.
Yep.
At Orlando versus Indiana versus Philadelphia, at Milwaukee, and then at Atlanta versus Utah, and then a pair with Brooklyn before going to Boston. So if they go down to Milwaukee, that'll be 5 more in a row. So that'd be 23 in a row for Atlanta, Utah, maybe one of those. Do you think they break the 26 streak, which is for a single season set by the not so long ago Philadelphia 76ers?
Yeah, no, I don't think they break it. Bogdanovich is back in the lineup. It's been really conspicuous that outside consistent shooting is what's hindering so much of their issues right now. So I do think that's going to change. If any team is going to drop it, it's going to be Atlanta. They're not focused from one night to the next. Philly, they're going to play back to back. You got to imagine that Embiid is going to rest one of those games against a bad team.
But they're not going to beat him the second game, though, or the first game.
I don't think so, but if they rest Embiid on the second game and people are not taking care of business and all of a sudden Detroit gets hot, I think the Pistons have the ability to win once in these next 6 games and twice in the next 10. I think that'll happen.
If they break the record, it will be against Toronto on December 30th. So we will have a new record holder if it happens.
At home in Detroit.
At home in Detroit. That's true. If they lose, that would be. You know what? I would buy tickets for that. I would buy. Let's see the record, right? Because the record might be broken by San Antonio later.
So last thing for me, and I know we've talked way too much about the Pistons, but I'm going to give some love. It's my home state now, and though I'm not a Pistons fan, I appreciate the history that's here with Detroit sports. Pistons fans are incredibly loyal. They show up, but we went to that Lakers game and it was 80% full in the building for a Lakers game. Yeah. That's one of the few games of the year that you sell out. The Pistons lost by, it was 133 to 107 when it was all said and done, but they were down by 35 for much of that game. It was so quiet in that building as everybody just kind of watches like, oh yeah, LeBron's good. The Lakers would get some cheers and they would do some oohs and ahs. People are appreciative of LeBron. They hate the Lakers because it's Detroit, but they appreciate LeBron. But it's just, it was sad. Like, this should be a better building than this. I know these fans, they will get behind a team. They are loyal. You saw people, all throughout the arena in their bad boys gear and stuff like that. They're hungry for a winner. Detroit, you got to start picking up some games here. Your fans deserve better than 2-19. They just do.
I was one of the guys that was bullish on them. I thought they'd have a much better chance.
Me too.
They are
Me
much
too.
worse. They are much worse. And I don't think it's just a Bogdanovich injury that's keeping him this bad.
Okay. I heard an interesting theory from a friend of mine who is a big Detroit fan. And he said it is a cosmic law that Detroit has to have one of the worst teams in sports at all times. And it's like the fact that the Lions are playing so well now means that the Pistons had to be the worst. Like there was no other way around it. And he's like, and as soon as the Pistons start playing well, it's going to be the Tigers or it's going to be back to the Lions being the bottom feeders. So,
poor Motor City. Poor Motor City. All right, Joel, that's going to do it for us. I think we did Wilt Chamberlain nicely proud on this.
We kept it under 100 minutes. So, I mean, we'll see if he's satisfied with that. Rest in peace, Big Dipper.
Listen, if we wanted to redo an episode, we got 54 more minutes to go. Mm-hmm. You got a marathon session in you?
I mean, first of all, and this is as much shade on me as anybody else, you and I got to get our schedules in order so we can just show up next week and be able to do the next show. So no, I can't do 100.
All right, well then we'll do a 100-minute episode next week. How's that?
Okay.
All right.
We'll verbally commit to that.
Goodbye.
See ya.